Trench Crusades had a quick turnaround from version 1.6.2 to version 1.6.3 for its playtest rules. While at time of recording the rules haven't been updated on their website yet, they've been posted in the Discord by the game designer Tuomas, and they'll be updated shortly after, he says. This isn't the biggest patch, and a lot more changes are promised, but there are a couple keywords added for clarification and just a couple balance changes that we'll be taking a look at. First off are the keyword additions. The demonic keyword has been added, stating that any model with it has been tainted by hell and is vulnerable to holy powers. Golem has been added as a keyword, and it's similar to the tough keyword, but just a little bit different. It treats any out of action as a down unless a bloodbath is used. It also states that gas does not inflict additional blood markers, and any golem unit cannot be affected by fear. The downside to the golem is that the controlling warband cannot remove blood markers on their own, only the opponent can use them. The leader keyword has also been added, which states as long as the leader model is not out of action, all morale tests get +1 dice. Moving on to the balance changes, the Trench Ghosts are back in action, having a couple changes. Firstly, having their slow reworked to no longer have the 5-inch movement characteristic, but go back to 6. They've also had the cost of their sarcophagus mines changed from 35 to 30, and the cost of their tank Palakin addition to their priest changed from 55 to 60 ducats. Something that's also clarified is that a couple of the warband's armories don't show the shotgun as being able to attach a bayonet or be used as a shield combo. This is rectified, and any of them that didn't have those keywords before now state that they can. Coming up to the Black Grail, there are some small changes in the armory. First off, the Plague Blade has had its cost changed from 10 to 7 ducats. The new item, the Grail Devotee, has also been changed from 15 ducats for the first and 2 glory points for the second, to just 15 ducats for both the first and the second. Moving on to the new leader keyword, we see that the text for the Plague Knight restricting not being able to have a Lord of Tumors has been removed, and the Plague Knights are still listed as selectable leaders, even though only the Lord of Tumors gets the leader keyword. This has been mentioned in the official Discord that this will be cleaned up and clarified later. Coming to the Plague Knight themselves, we see that the amount limit has been changed from 1 to 2 for all the warbands, and that you can now add ranks to the Plague Knights. These special ranks can have 1 applied to each knight, and they cost a couple ducats. The first is the Companion of the Fly, which adds +1 dice to either ranged or melee, and it costs 5 ducats. The second rank is of the Rotten Cross, which allows the knight to purchase weapons from New Antioch or the Heretic Legion armories. It can keep making these purchases down the line in the campaign as well. The last rank that's been added is the Plague Almoner, which makes it so the knight requires 1 less blood marker or infection marker to cause a bloodbath, and this costs 10 ducats. Next we come to the Grail and Fly Thralls, and we see clarification added back to the Undead Fortitude skill, stating that the Fly Thralls are not affected by this, to better match up before 1.6.2. Clarification for the Amalgam is also placed, just to make sure you can understand that 2 of its arms can wield heavy weapons. We also see one last change to the Black Grail, coming in the Dirge variant, who had a few changes in the last patch, and it's just that the Viscera cannon limit is increased from 2 to 3 for the Dirge variant. The other changes in this patch are to the Court of the Seven-Headed Serpent. Firstly, in the Armory, we see that the Unholy Relic cost has been changed from 30 to 15 ducats. There's also a new item, the Restraining Muzzle, which costs 10 ducats and has a limit of 3. This can only be placed on Yoke Fiends, and when placed on them, it removes their Hateful trait, forcing them to charge to the nearest opponent within 12 inches, and it adds +1 ranged modification on their rolls. There's also some clarification and changes to a few of the Goetic spells, the first being the new Slave Master spell that clarifies it can be used on any friendly Yoke Fiend, no longer can use it on the enemy. The Morphean Mind spell is also clarified to only be able to be used on elites. It's also had its limit of 2 removed. And the last little bit of balance for the spells is that the Eater of Flesh spell has been changed from 25 ducats down to 10. A nice new addition to join the fact that the Desecrated Saint now has a Greed aura are the Goetic Greed spells. First we come to Body of Gold, which costs 15 ducats and can be placed on a single elite. This adds the Golem keyword that was also added in this patch, and it removes the Tough keyword if it had that. The second spell is the Black Heart spell. It costs 15 ducats and has a limit of 3. There's no mention of elite only, but given how every other spell is meant for the Praetors, Sorcerers, and elites only, it's likely this was a missed typo. This spell costs 1 blood marker to use for a model, and it adds +1 dice to any action. It can be used multiple times in a single activation, but each action can only have 1 dice added to it. The last spell is Universal Greed, which costs 15 ducats. There's a limit of 1, it's placed on an elite, and it's a passive. Every model that the opposing warband has that costs 150 ducats or more gives a blessing marker to the unit that has this spell. There's no mention yet if glory points will be converted into ducats, so right now it's just straight ducat cost. Lastly, we come to the units. While the mandatory unit to be deployed for every warband has had the leader tag added to it, we see that the Praetor has had the leader role added, even though it's not a mandatory requirement. And the last change for the patch is the Desecrated Saint. It's had its cost changed from 145 down to 140 ducats, and clarification's been re-added that was lost in the last patch, stating that there are no offhand penalties for its attacks. And that's all the changes between version 1.6.2 and version 1.6.3. There are a lot of changes happening in a short amount of time, so be sure to come on back and check out the next time a patch drops, as I'll be covering the changelog then too. And if there are any rules that seem like they could be a little bit muddy for interpretation or could use additional clarification, just be patient. Work's constantly being done, and we'll see all of the rules fixed and clarified in due time.